Okay, let's see. There's 5 things I watched. So let's go ahead and begin with something I started watching last week and mentioned. Uh, Kara no Kyoukai, also known as The Garden of Sinners. Now, last week I mentioned I watched the first episode, or the first movie, and, it was kind of... I was pretty indifferent to it. It didn't feel as spectacular as I would have thought, and it seemed a bit pretentious. I've had a chance to watch it a second time, and I think my feelings are a little lifted on the pretentious side, but for the most part, I think it's kind of a weak opening to an anime, even if we were to consider it an episode, mostly because it fails to really grab your attention into why you should be interested in the series. I mean, like, the very first scene is 2 characters interacting in a rather undecorated apartment, so I think a whole lot of what's supposed to be appealing about this is not just, like, the action scenes themselves, since there are plenty of flaws with them, as cool as some of them are. But rather, it's also supposed to be something that you get wowed over because of the attention to detail or whatnot, and I don't think there was anything particularly wowing or detailish about that very first few scenes. Like, they forgot that they should introduce you to the anime in such a way where you say, oh, is this what kind of movie I'm going to be watching? Or, oh, is this what kind of series I'm going to be watching? Maybe you could say that they took some liberties with that and just made it a 40 or 50 minute long episode. And it's a 40 to 50 minute long first episode that doesn't necessarily promise that there could be more interesting things to come. It just so happens that since all the movies are generally rated separately, you can tell that there are better things to come, because the first movie tends to be among the lowest rated of the movies. It's not necessarily the case for everybody everywhere you go, of course. And I did watch the other movies, and it actually got a lot better right from the second episode. Or the second movie, rather. So of the 7 movies, my favorite was really the third movie. That one rates pretty high, although it looked like more people found the 5th and 7th ones to be more interesting. And I'm not entirely sure what it is. Something about the third movie just resonated with my preferences a lot more than the 5th movie, and I could try and figure it out, but I've got too much anime to watch, so we'll just stick with that. Talking about the ending of the series, it seemed like a pretty appropriate ending, I suppose. It wasn't entirely obvious that it was really trying to head for any specific ending per se, I guess. Maybe a sort of vaguish, the way characters change the way they interact with each other, I guess. But it isn't necessarily constructed as a relationship series, so it's kind of not perfect, unless you throw the epilogue in there, and the epilogue, I think, kind of wraps things up a bit better, although at the same time, the epilogue is rated lowly for a good reason. That's because it's 30 minutes of 2 characters talking, and I thought they were pretty repetitive. It seemed more like an attempt for the makers to show off all their snow effects than to really bring closure to the anime. Unless they were thinking, oh, people aren't going to get it, so we have to go with the standard repeat what you want people to hear thing. So, or repeat the point you want people to get sort of idea, I guess. It's not too bad. And I also watched the remix movie that happened before the 7th movie, and that was actually pretty interesting. Overall, it's a very complete box set, so it was pretty worth it in terms of wanting to have all of something, and I don't consider it a waste of time at all to have watched it. In fact, even though I was, for the most part, confused, it still had my attention very well. Just a little problem near the end of the 7th movie there, when I had a Skorupi hatch with 31 IVs in HP attack, defense, and special attack. And I wasn't expecting that. That was a surprise. Anyways, let's move on to the next anime, which is Chrome Shelled Regios, which I actually started watching before last week's update. I just forgot to mention it. But I guess that's okay, because I finished it after last week's update, and it's kind of interesting how, it wasn't as spectacular as Garden of Sinners, but at the same time, it kind of does the things that I wish Garden of Sinners did, which is, it begins at the very beginning of the first episode with an action scene so that you know just how awesome our main character is. Because the basic premise is, if you've got an awesome main character, they want us to know just how much he's holding back through the entire series, and I thought they did a pretty good job of not holding him too back. As in, like, he just did awesome, did awesome, did awesome. It's like he had a deck of awesomes, and he just occasionally threw them out on the table, and everybody's like, oh, geez, what was that? Oh, must have been a fluke or something. I don't think they were all that stupid in the anime. About the most interesting thing, though, the ending for that one was also a bit confusing for me, because they mix in a movie that the characters in the anime watch, but it's not presented in a way where it looks like they're actually watching it. So it's confusing, because I was trying to figure out what that has to do with the story, and it has nothing to do with the story. So that just left me confused and did not set me up well for the ending when I was trying to unite the two, and it turned out they couldn't be united, I think. In any case, I think the most interesting thing to mention about this series is there's just something amusing about the way the faces were drawn. I think part of it is they had an outline of the entire face, which for the most part actually caused a lot of characters to have continuous lines underneath their eyes that made them look either sleepy, continuously angry, or maybe they just always looked continuously angry because they were continuously angry. Or high. In fact, our main character's neutral look, where he's just sitting there with this little smile on his face like, yeah, everything's going well. He looks like he literally looks high. It's just really amusing, the way it did that. I really should show you all the pictures, but it's, taking me a while to dig out the CDs. And actually, I had moved Murder Princess somewhere, and that I didn't remember where. That took a while to find, actually. Oh, well, that's babbling. Chrome Shelled Regios, I thought it was an entertaining idea. Let's see. Next up is Summer Wars, and I was actually looking forward to watching that, but unfortunately, I didn't enjoy it all that much. It's not that there's anything about it that's specifically bad, other than it hit too many places where I had to suspend disbelief way too much, and a lot of that problem is that I graduated with a degree in computer science, and this is specifically from University of Texas, so that basically means there's a very theoretical, mathematical base in there. So when they begin the anime with the basic, or rather when they begin the main story with the basic premise that our main character factored a number, I mean, he didn't exactly, he decrypted a key overnight, and it was just, it's like, what? And you find out that a lot of people kind of did it too. It's just like, what? What? That's not how security works in the real world. I mean, I joke, he's going to spend the entire night trying to factor the number with my computer science friend, and he's like, he wondered if I was joking, and then it turned out the character did do that. We were quite surprised and shocked. That alone wouldn't have been the only problem if it wasn't for a couple of other things that just really bugged me the entire time. The main problem for me being that their family is a family of dipshits. I mean, they just have no respect for anybody's, I wouldn't say personal space so much as they just don't have any respect for anybody else, period. They take each other's things all the time, they accuse each other, attack each other, blah blah blah, playing fucking family politics, and accusing and pointing fingers and power tripping and taking from each other and being idiots through the entire movie. And things like that just really bug me. So I don't think those bug most people, though. So that would probably explain why most people have no problem watching this, whereas I would have a big problem with it. It's because, I had a lot of trouble believing the premise, and then I had a lot of trouble sympathizing with any character other than the very main character, and then just totally stressed out watching the movie, and I can't help but think there was a third problem. Maybe the resolution, which I thought was awfully dangerous. Don't you live in a populated area where you could just end up killing somebody else instead? Sort of situation. Yeah. So, I didn't like Summer Wars, but you can hear some of the reasons why I didn't. And if you think those are things that really bug you, that should probably be a really good hint whether or not you might like it. It really depends on how much you can suspend disbelief to watch this stuff. Anyways, moving on to the next anime, I did watch Cat Shit 1, which was an amusing little thing. My opinion watching it was that it seemed very much like it was actually a lot like a zombie survival horror. Not so much that there were zombies or zombie-like opponents, but more like, at some level, I think a lot of us are fascinated with zombie survival horrors because we think that somehow we would survive the survival horror or something. Like, we have survival fantasies, and Cat Shit 1 kind of felt like that in terms of, our main characters are always very careful when going around corners and stuff, and the bad guys are not. They don't seem to be. So they feel like doom targets. Or, okay, I don't play enough first-person shooters. Okay, just like generic combine soldiers who can just walk forward and stand by explosives and whatnot. They're just targets to be knocked down almost. So, it wasn't that big of a deal, though, because it was hard to take Cat Shit 1 serious because it didn't seem like it was serious. It's bunnies in the desert with guns, military bunnies. It's just silly, and I think it was intended to be, so it's okay. Let's see, the final thing I watched was the very first Mobile Suit Gundam movie, which is a movie version of the first chunk of the original Mobile Suit Gundam series. And coming from somebody who watched the original Mobile Suit Gundam, I have to say that it's not as entertaining as I could have hoped. But then again, if you think about it, it's basically taking the series and it's not really reanimating much of it as far as I can tell, if there's anything new at all. It's basically just trying to condense the story into something you can watch in a, well, my guess is a 6-hour period for all 3 movies. But, this was the first movie, which is all I watched, and really, as a movie, it's pretty flawed, but I probably should not have watched it expecting anything else. The main problem is I kept thinking, they could have maybe identified a good key story point that would have been a good ending to a movie, and tried to have the series end there, work its way towards ending there. But I think about 4 or 5 of those points passed, and it's like, at that point you can only shrug your shoulders and say, okay, there's no way I can predict when in the series they ended this movie, so there's just watching it. And unfortunately, it's not the ideal thing I would want to rewatch, so it was a little painful, especially since I'm trying to do Pokemon breeding at the same time, but it's subtitled. I wonder if there is a dub or not. I didn't check in detail. Oh well. So a little frustration there, but I think I can give it a lot of leeway because it's really easy to see why I went into that with bad expectations. Because I watched that immediately after watching Kara no Kyoukai. So, and even if Kara no Kyoukai doesn't fit my ideal flow of a movie, which admittedly Summer Wars did, It's just I had a lot of trouble enjoying Summer Wars, right? And I don't know. It's very strange. I watched all movies this week, didn't I? Other than Chrome Shell Regios. Oh well. Anyways, I'm not quite sure what's up next. I do want to start working harder through the Gundam stuff because I can't watch Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn until, well, I can't feel honest with myself watching it until I've watched the other Universal Century stuff. So I've got to start getting through that, and I wanted to rewatch the Mobile Suit Gundam movies to put check marks by them. So I guess that's maybe what I'll work on, but we don't know what I'll do. I don't know what I'll do. You don't know what I'll do, because I keep doing whatever the hell I feel like doing, right? So we'll see what happens next week.